And today we're going to talk about request to pay. And I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of experts. And we're going to delve into how does request to pay help billers, banks, and consumers, end users and small businesses. How does it help them manage money and pay their bills? And I think now more than ever, as the restrictions from COVID-19 start to lift and we start getting used to the new norm, it's really important to understand new products that really help put control in the consumer's hands and then help them to understand what they need to pay, how they pay, and when they can pay. So mobile first propositions grew significantly during the pandemic, the use of digital wallets and digital apps. And request to pay is a great product that really adds to that set. So as the slide we've got in front of us talks about, we're going to talk about request to pay. I want to talk a little bit about the strategic direction of Pay.UK to give a bit of context. Then one of my colleagues, Simon Brooks, who's our real deep expert on request to pay, will give you a bit of a deep dive into the product itself. And then we'll go through with our panelists and get their unique position on request to pay and how it helps their particular segment. So if we move to the next slide. So let's do a little bit of intros and backgrounds for all of the panelists. So I touched on the fact that I'm Chief Business Development Officer at Pay.UK. I've been in banking and payments in the industry for over 30 years, gosh, it seems an awful long time, and really focused on strategic roles, product development roles, and customer solutions. Driving really good customer solutions has always been an important part of any role that I play. Let me move on to Simon Brooks. And again, Simon has, we're a really esteemed panel. Simon has over 30 years banking experience. He currently is a faster payments manager within Pay.UK and was involved in request to pay right from the initial idea stage. And if I move along to David Cox, so David has 18 years experience of working in banking. He also managed a number of high street branches before moving away from banking and managing clothing retail outlets, working for Virgin Mobile, and then currently he leads all of the payments activity for Virgin Media across all channels and all payment types. And then we've got Tony Craddock, and Tony is really passionate about payments, and you'll see that when Tony talks to us in a few minutes. He founded the Payments Association in 2010 and makes sure that the Payments Association promotes the UK as a great hub for payments innovation and a leader in global payments. And last, but certainly not least, we've got Tina Harrison. And Tina has nearly 30 years of experience with University of Edinburgh. She's a professor of financial services, marketing and consumption. And Tina also sits on the board of a credit union. So I think you'll see that we've got a really great panel, and I'm hoping today's discussion brings out different aspects and different angles of how request to pay can help the UK economy. So if we move to the next slide, please. So before we start, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. So today's session is going to be recorded. Only the panelists will be shown on the recording, but you can share the link with any friends or colleagues who are unable to make today's webinar. If you'd like to ask a question, can you use the question and answer facility? There's a button at the bottom of your screen. And then at the end of the session, Anu, who opened the conference, will actually curate the Q&A session with the panelists. And if you're experiencing any problems with raising a question, please email info@requesttopay.co.uk and the team will add your question to the set. So that's really us. Let's move on to actually the meat of the matter, what we're here to talk about today. So I did talk about doing a bit of a quick overview of what we're doing in Pay.UK and what our strategic focus is at the moment. So I think more than ever before, and payments has been accelerating, the change in payments has been accelerating over the last 10 years. But more than ever before, with digital adoption being so high, the pace of change is even more significant. And part of our role, as well as making sure payments flow really safely and securely in the UK, is also to add innovation on top of that and to stimulate others in the market to think about how they develop really great new payments propositions and services for their customers. So we've got a number of key goals that we focus on, and I'll pick a couple of them from the ones you see on screen today. I think driving enduring resilience is core. Can you imagine a world where something happens in the background and UK people do not get paid at the end of a month? That would have a significant impact on the UK economy. So we have to make sure everything we do makes sure that the core payment systems run really well, really securely, day in, day out, and people don't really notice payments happening fundamentally. And touching on safety and security, one of our key goals, strengthening safety and security, is really driven out of the increase in fraud that we've seen in payments in the UK over the last 3 years in particular. And we've seen quite a lot of fraud move from card rails onto faster payments. And we want to make sure we work with the industry to help drive out fraud and make sure that our payment platforms are as secure as they can be and that consumers are protected. And then enhancing access and innovation. I mean, this is a really important part of our role. We sit at the centre of the industry. We don't have all the ideas or all of the solutions, but what we can do is build coalitions and pull the industry together to look at how we develop new types of proposition. So they're really key parts of what we focus on as Pay.UK. So let's move on to talk about Request to Pay. So Request to Pay, I suppose in its simplest form, Request to Pay is a messaging solution. And it's a messaging solution that allows a biller, like David's company, Virgin Media, to send a message to a consumer to let them know their bill's ready to pay. Now, Request to Pay is payment agnostic, and that means the customer is able to choose how they actually pay that bill, when they pay it, all of these kind of things. It really aligns closely with our strategic goal of providing different options of ways that UK consumers and businesses can make payments. That's really key to what we do in Pay.UK. I think the biggest point though, and what we'll really pull out today as we speak to the panel, is it's a network service. And actually, like any network service, we can't do this ourselves. So it's really important that we get excitement in the industry, that we get banks and billers and end users understanding what Request to Pay does and actually what benefits it can bring to the UK economy, to small business, to help consumers control their bills. And so with that, I'm going to ask Simon Brooks to come in and give us a bit more of a deep dive into the product itself. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Kate. That was really good introduction into Request to Pay. And as you can see from the slide in front of you, I'm going to take you on a journey. And as Kate has already said, I started my journey in RTP way back in 2015. But I'm sure you'll all be pleased to hear that I won't be going back, taking you from 2015 to the current day. I'm going to do a sort of whistle-stop tour through the journey that we've taken to get to where we are today, just to give you a bit of background to understand some of the things that we're going to talk to you about today, so that you've got some information that will help you understand why some of the things that we're going to talk about were developed. So as I say, we started the work on Request to Pay back in 2015, but to bring it more up to date, 2017 was the time that the Payment Strategy Forum put their blueprint into practice and handed over to the predecessor of Pay.UK the requirement to go away and build the Request to Pay proposition. During the time before 2017 and afterwards, we've always undertook consultation in respect of Request to Pay, and unlike any other project I've worked on in payments, it's been consultation and research all the way to determine what the users of Request to Pay want. So it's not one of those cases like faster payments, for example, where we built it and then asked everyone to come and connect to it. What we've done with Request to Pay is taken it out and tested every single thing that relates to Request to Pay with everyone in the UK economy. So right from the top of government all the way down to the man on the street. So we're pretty sure and pretty confident that what we've built and what we've created in the framework for Request to Pay is what the public have asked us and what business has asked us and what government have asked us to do. So as I say, that consultation started way back in 2015 and has carried on until today and will carry on into the future, just to make sure that the proposition of Request to Pay is exactly what the consumers want. And that is control and flexibility, but also from a biller perspective, they need the similar things that direct debit can offer them. And it's really important to say here that Request to Pay is not a replacement for direct debit. It sits alongside direct debit, and it gives consumers different options in the way that they want to pay their bills. But more importantly, for a biller, it also provides that element that direct debit does, which is that biller reference. So from a reconciliation perspective, it provides them with the information that they need to reconcile that payment. And that information is automatically populated into the payment. From the perspective of 2020, May of that year, during the height of the pandemic, which is probably not the best of times to launch a service, but we published the framework and we launched the RTP framework. We currently have 2 organisations who have signed up to the framework, and we have another 10 or 11 in the pipeline. The 2 that have signed up are Answer Pay and MasterCard. Answer Pay is a technical solution provider, and MasterCard as a provider of repositories and a biller app. From 2021 onwards, we've created a Request to Pay mark, so we hope that you will start to see those on the back of bills and in shops and banks, telling you that you can utilise Request to pay your bills. So keep an eye out for that mark. I'm hopeful that you will start to see it in lots of more places as RTP grows. And the one underlying thing for everything that we've done during the build of Request to Pay is to keep it safe and secure and to have that interoperability. So looking into the future, we've got the framework, as I've said, but we haven't stopped there. We're continuing to develop Request to Pay. And some of the things that we're looking to develop are on this slide here in front of you. I'm not going to talk about all of them because I want us to get to the interviews with the 3 people that we've brought along to talk about Request to Pay. I know many of you have probably heard me talk about Request to Pay in the past, so I'm quite keen to get onto the Q&A, but I just want to give you a flavour that just because we've launched a framework, we haven't stopped there. We've developed what we're calling an interactive advance notice with the BACS team. So this is to enable us to help with the direct debit and maybe help prevent direct debits being either cancelled or unfortunately not paid because of insufficient funds. So with the Request to Pay proposition, the interactive advanced element of it, today you can receive these advance notices via text or via the post or via an email. What we're hoping is in the future, you'll be able to receive them via Request to Pay using the Request to Pay rails. And unlike those 3 elements that I talked about before, i.e. email, text and post, the proposition that we're putting forward here, the interactive advance notice, will allow the consumer to interact with the biller and will also, if the biller offers it, allows them to offer different dates for the direct debit to be taken. So we're quite excited about that, and we're hoping that this will be launched sometime in the second half of 2021. Sorry, 2022, forgetting where I am. Overpayments is something else that we're working with a charity. Some of you may have heard of Pennies, and we're looking at utilising the Request to Pay proposition to allow consumers to add round up their bill. So if they were to receive a water bill, and this proposition would enable them to be asked if they would like to round up the sum to pay for, let's say, a charity like WaterAid. So we're working on that, but it will also allow for overpayments. So you say you want to overpay your mortgage because you've got a bit of spare cash. It will allow you to do that, but it would also, from a restaurant perspective, allow you to go to a restaurant and tip the waiter, or waitress. So we're looking at that, and that's something that is in development. And again, we're hoping to launch this in 2022. And the cancellations, we're looking at this as well, and this is something that will again be launched in 2022, and this will enable requests to be cancelled. So we're very excited about all of these new things that we're developing, and I hope you see from what I'm talking about here that we haven't just stopped at the introduction of the framework. We're looking at new message types that can be utilized and utilize the request to pay rails. And you can see from the bottoms of that slide, we've also got other propositions that are coming along. Ones that I'm really excited about are the point of sale and the proxy identification, where you could use your mobile phone or your email address to receive requests. So we're quite excited about those. But now I want to move on to looking at where request to pay brings wide-ranging developments for consumers and helps consumers and billers and banks and solution providers. We're offering a whole range of different elements that help these different segments of society. So in total, we hope that the introduction of Pay.UK's version of request to pay will help the UK economy to grow, and particularly in these times of difficulty where we're starting to see large concerns about high fuel costs, high utility bills, that request to pay can really help in this space. But we also believe that there are elements that we need to advise you of that you may not have been aware of. There are a number of myths about request to pay, and particularly the request to pay proposition that has been produced by Pay.UK. And one of the big ones is we needed to make it safe and secure. So request to pay has been developed to ensure that the users of it will remain safe and secure as much as we possibly can. And unlike other request to pay propositions that exist today, whereby you would receive a text or an email with a link in it, the request to pay proposition developed by Pay.UK isn't like that at all. It's totally driven with safe and secure at the back of our minds. So that's really important to remember. We've also established through conversations with UK Finance and other organisations that we think that request to pay will help reduce fraud, based on the fact that we are keeping it safer and secure, and by the way that organisations are onboarded to the request to pay framework. We believe that request to pay, particularly in the business to person space, can help to reduce fraud. And today, as fraud is one of the major topics on everyone's lips, we think that request to pay, the proposition that's been put forward by Pay.UK, can help to reduce and even prevent fraud. We also, one of the key elements that doesn't exist in any other request to pay proposition is that communication element, allowing the biller and the payer to communicate with one another. So I could receive a request and not know who it's from, and I can actually respond to the biller and say, I don't know who you are, can you provide me with more information? Or, in the circumstances of you get your gas bill and you've read your meter and the meter reading is wrong on the bill, you can actually respond back to the biller without having to pick up a phone. So we're really excited about that. Enhanced data and analytics, as I talked right at the start, this allows the biller to put in their biller reference details, and that is automatically transported with the request and then populated in the payment. So there's no, where in the faster payments world, if I pay my gas bill, I can type in any reference I want, like gas bill. Request to pay alleviates that problem and also resolves the fat fingered, because I don't even have to type in the sort code and account number and account name of the biller that I'm trying to pay. So we're really excited about that as well. That's one of the fundamental elements that billers asked us to add into the request to pay proposition. Flexibility and greater choice for the consumer. As we've mentioned a few times, Request to Pay is a messaging service. It's not a payment service, and it's payment agnostic. So it gives the payer a lot more choice in how they pay and when they pay. There are still due dates. There's still the legal requirements. Contractually, nothing changes just because you're receiving the request electronically or the bill electronically. So we believe that Request to Pay can offer the more flexibility and control that the 21st century is looking for. And then cash flow. Obviously, Request to Pay will allow you to see all your bills in one place. So it will allow for consumers to have more control over their when and how they pay their bills. But also from a smaller business perspective, it will allow them to see, you know, payments coming in and going out in near real time. So unlike direct debit, there will be no 3-day wait. This is Request to Pay is real time. So will help with cash flow, particularly for those smaller organizations. And finally, reconciliation. As I said, this is a big game changer from our perspective, because it offers what the billers has asked us for, which is to allow for reconciliation to occur, because they're getting the information back that they need to allow that to happen. So we're really excited about Request to Pay. But now I want to move on just to finally say that we're going to focus on 3 areas now when I hand back to Kate, which are to look at the financially vulnerable and why Request to Pay, we believe, can help in that space. But you're not just going to hear it from me, you're hearing it from other experts outside of Pay.UK. How it can help with small, medium enterprises. So what can Request to Pay do to help those types of organizations? And there are hundreds, if not, well, I know there are thousands of those types of organizations in the UK, and there are startups like small, medium enterprises every single day. And then we're going to also look at large billers and how Request to Pay can help large billers. So without further ado, I'm going to hand back to Kate, and over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks very much. So let's get into the conversation with our external experts. And the first person I want to speak to today is Tina. And Tina and I are going to have a conversation really focusing on how Request to Pay will help vulnerable customers. It's a really important segment for our industry to understand more of. So the first thing, Tina, I wanted to ask you was, could you tell us a bit more about yourself and the work that you do at the University of Edinburgh?
Yes, Kate. So because I work at a university, I'm a researcher ultimately. So I do research into consumers and financial services. I'm really interested in understanding how people use financial services, but with a particular lens on financial well-being, and trying to understand how we can improve that well-being. So I do my own research to try and understand behaviours, but I also do quite a lot of work with organisations, helping them do research to improve their relationships with their customers around financial well-being. So I'm interested in understanding what people can do to help improve their own financial well-being, and how products and services can be designed or made available that can enhance that for consumers.
Super, that's really interesting. If we focus on, I suppose, really what are the challenges that financially vulnerable people experience? And also, I've heard a lot of talk about the poverty premium. It'd be good to get your views of what is the poverty premium, please, Tina.
Okay, thanks. So I suppose, first of all, we're all at risk of experiencing vulnerability and financial vulnerability at some point. Some people are more inherently financially vulnerable than others because of their circumstances, and they experience persistent vulnerability. But as the pandemic has shown us recently, anyone can become financially vulnerable. We've seen more ill health and significant life events leading to loss of incomes and job instabilities, and anybody can experience that at any point. before the pandemic, we saw that a large number of adults already experienced low financial resilience. They were managing on tight budgets, had limited savings, or had patterns of borrowing that placed them in greater risk if they'd experienced an income shock. And risk of losing employment or loss of earnings has really been at the forefront of people's minds. And this is even more pronounced for those people that are self-employed. At the height of the pandemic, we saw that almost 2/5 of adults anticipated either struggling to make ends meet or saw their debt levels increase and weren't able to manage their bills effectively or keep up with mortgages or rents or other credit and loan commitments. So there certainly is an area out there where financial vulnerability is certainly a key concern. And you mentioned the poverty premium. Well, the poverty premium is really a particular type of vulnerability affecting those on very low incomes or those living in poverty. And quite simply, it's the extra cost that people on low incomes or in poverty pay for essential products and services. Often people that are paying more are doubly penalised because they're penalised for living in poverty anyway. And then a lot of the extra costs that they often pay can be due to the payment mechanisms that they're forced to use because they can't benefit from direct debits. They might be restricted to using prepayment meters, for example, for energy bills, which adds an additional cost to the charge of the service that they're using. And the Financial Conduct Authority has issued guidance on fair treatment of vulnerable customers that places the onus on firms to understand their customers' needs and respond to them in ways by designing or using appropriate services and products. And I do think there's a huge opportunity in dealing with vulnerable consumers in this area with regards to request to pay.
Okay. I think you touched a bit on this about how big the problem of financial vulnerability is in the UK. You said 2/5 of adults during the COVID pandemic were at risk of becoming financially vulnerable. Would you like to say anything more about the size of the problem, Tina?
Yeah, I'd say both financial vulnerability and poverty premium are significant and increasing problems. So before the pandemic, the FCA estimated that just under half of the UK population exhibited at least one characteristic of vulnerability. And often these are hidden. They're hidden to firms. They don't know necessarily who their vulnerable customers are. And since the pandemic, we've seen an additional 3.5 million adults experiencing low financial resilience. And this now totals a quarter of all UK adults experiencing some sort of financial resilience. We're on the cusp of a cost of living crisis as well. And so it's likely that people who ordinarily wouldn't be considered as vulnerable will now be captured as vulnerable customers. On top of that, we're also seeing a growing gig economy and 0 hours contracts, and this is changing the marketplace. Traditionally, people had stable incomes and could predict income flows and cash flows, and that's now not the case for many people. And so being able to have greater control over budgets and knowing when bills are likely to be paid is becoming increasingly difficult for individuals to manage that on a kind of a regular basis.
Okay, that's a nice segue into my next question, which is really around how do you see request to pay helping with this really growing problem?
Well, I think the current payment methods, such as direct debit, they do work really well for a vast majority of people, but for others, they don't work as well. As I've said, you know, contexts and lifestyles have changed, and direct debits just don't work for those individuals where they haven't got a kind of a regularity of income or can't predict what their incomes will be from one month to the next. So more and more people really require that flexibility to know when and how they can pay their bills. And I think this is something really that request to pay can help with by offering partial payments, offering changes in payment dates, asking for extensions, and also being able to communicate their challenges directly with the billers, perhaps even being able to forward their bills on to another member of the family who might pay the bill for them. I think the key thing here is about choice and also giving that control back to consumers so that they they're in the best situation to know when they're in position to be able to pay their bills and manage their budgets. And I think it is about empowering them and giving them that control to manage that effectively. And in doing so, increasing the likelihood that bills actually will be paid by consumers.
Great, thank you, Tina. And one last question. So Simon touched on the fact that we've got 2 companies signed up to Request to Pay. Obviously, the UK economy has lots and lots of billers, banks, etc. What do you think needs to happen to get Request to Pay to really take off?
Well, ultimately, we need firms to adopt it and make it available to their customers. So I guess I would be urging companies really to look at their customer base and consider who might benefit from this. So, for example, you know, who within your customer base has got irregular income flows? Who's not using direct debits? Who are they chasing for bills? You know, this might be because the invoicing schedules don't match with customers' income flows. So, you know, I think, you know, we just need a few organisations really to take that bold step to offer a more customer-centric approach to bill paying and make that available to customers and to consumers more widely.
Yeah, it's that network effect and starting the movement, you know, definitely. Okay, well, thank you very much. That was really interesting to get your perspective. I'm going to move on to Tony now, but we'll bring you back, Tina, when we've got questions. So, Tony Craddock, welcome. And Tony, we're going to talk about Request to Pay through the lens of cash flow for small enterprises in the UK. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do and what your interest in Request to Pay is? Oh, you're on mute, Tony.
The old trick. So look, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me along, especially now you can hear me. I'm from the Payments Association. I set this up 12 years ago. We now have 180 companies in the UK, about 40 in Europe and about 40 in Asia, all working together to collaborate in a way that helps to bring new payments-related innovations to the market. With the aspiration of improving lives everywhere. And when I first saw Request to Pay, way back when it was announced by Craig Tillotson, who was a CEO of Faster Payments many years ago, I thought, this is amazing. This has got to be a happening thing. And yet we're not quite there yet. So I'm really delighted to have a chance to enthuse about this. I think it's a great capability, and I think we should be adopting it soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tony. So let's go into what kind of challenges do you hear on a daily basis from small businesses that you deal with?
So look, Companies House registers 4 million companies in the UK, and there were more than 800,000 new ones registered last year. And the burden of late payments on the already financially stretched small and medium-sized enterprises sector cannot be overstated. And then when you exacerbate these challenges by the pandemic, which is still going, by the disturbed supply chains because of Ukraine and growing input prices and inflation, and then challenges around employment, getting the right people. And then we lay on top of that another challenge, which is the boom in APP fraud and invoice related fraud. I mean, life's not easy for SMEs out there. It's really not. And it's been estimated that there are currently £23.4 billion worth, at least, of late invoices. Those aren't just invoices, but late invoices that are owed to firms across business, and that impacts on their cash flow. And ultimately, I believe that impacts on their survival, their chances of them doing the job that they should do for fueling our economy and our society. And that's one of the reasons why the government stepped in at the start of 2021 to strengthen the prompt payment code. But that's just not enough. We need to have technology enabling this rather than just a positive, strong statement from the government. Great.
And then how do you see Request to Pay helping with this big problem, Tony? How does it fit?
Yeah, so I think there's probably 3 areas. At the very least, is better liquidity, because sending out an invoice once a month, instead of that, they can make smaller real-time transactions enabled that will unlock cash potentially a lot quicker. It's a lot easier to pay if you're a receipt of a request to pay instruction, and so it's easier to go through the payment process. I mean, like the other day, I had to get a medical bill paid, and when I had to do this, instead of clicking on the link, which by the way I was not happy to do anyway, but eventually clicked on the link, and then I found that I had to copy and cut and paste account details, hospital details, dates, and all sorts of other things. If it had been done through the request to pay app capability, that would have been done easily, securely, and as a result, I would have paid instantly rather than 3 months later when I finally got round to it. So there's better liquidity. There's improved reconciliation. Matching payments with receipts for small businesses is not what people got into business for. It's really not. And it keeps them up at night, and it takes them time and effort, and it takes money to pay for the resource to do that reconciliation. So that's improved. And then finally, there's the option with some of Simon's fancy new products and services. If we can do a partial payment function with request to pay, then the biller can also offer an early payment discount, which can help the invoice get paid earlier. So all those three reasons, I think, has the potential to reduce costs as well as improve cash flow. And there's one other delightful kicker here, which is our economy is just going into an inflationary downward spiral. It's not looking good over the next 12 months or so. It's a tough old market out there. I believe that if we can get this right, this will release liquidity and working capital into the economy. That'll enable more people to be employed, more products and services to be developed and sold, and ultimately a chance for us to tackle some of our economic challenges in the UK as well.
Great, thank you, Tony. So I suppose the same question as I asked Tina, what do you think needs to change to really make request to pay take off and the network really start to grow?
Well, you talked about the network effect. Agree with that. Tina's point is entirely valid. We've got to get some people doing it. I personally think it's a source of competitive advantage, not just for banks, although I think it is, but for non-bank PSPs. I think they should be offering request to pay to their SME customers. Answer Pay you mentioned. Blue Chain is another one of our members. There are organizations out there that are innovating and offering these services. It's as if we're sitting around kind of standing around our handbags wondering who's going to actually jump in and get on with it. And I think there's part of it is that, and that's why I'm pleased that Pay.UK is actually promoting request to pay as assertively as it is. I think is a really good thing. I think, you know, even if the request to pay proposition helps to prevent 5% of SMEs from booking bankruptcy, I think that would help reduce the costs for banks in the long run. And I also think that in the long run, these SMEs, if they can continue to be successful, will generate a lot more revenue for the banks as well. So competitive advantage for banks and non-bank PSPs, a chance to generate competitive advantage and ultimately help people make more money, including the SMEs that are involved with benefiting from request to pay.
So a big societal type benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tony. We'll invite you back in a few minutes for questions, but I'm going to move on to David Cox. Welcome, David, to today's panel. Could you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do in Virgin Media, please?
Yeah, of course. So I did 18 years in the banking industry, learned all about payments in the back end from a technical perspective. Then I took 2 years to run some retail outlets, learned all about closing and profitability and retail till systems. And then I joined Virgin Mobile as was, running some frontline teams, moved into the finance area. So accounts payable, receivables, P2P, bank reconciliation, ended up in payments. So everything I do now is payment related, whether it's existing payment flows or new project payment related elements that our business wants to deliver.
Super. And obviously Virgin Media has thousands of customers, and you have many ways that your customers can actually pay for their services as well. What are the current challenges that you see your customers facing into?
I think our challenge is always collecting money on time as efficiently and cheaply as possible. That's any business objective. And I think for us, it's ensuring we're offering the correct payment options to meet all our customers' needs. So that would range from a customer that chooses still to go to the post office with their bank giro credit just because it's the only person they may see in a week, to well-established payment methods that everyone knows about already. Direct debits we've touched on already. So I think that's our key one. Just picking up on what Simon said, direct debit obviously it is well established. Request to pay isn't to replace that. If a large biller manages direct debits effectively, then you can, with correct comms and rules and regulations, you can get 99% success with direct debit. However, just picking up on what Tina was covering earlier, which she articulated really effectively, direct debit doesn't work for everyone. There's demographics out there that can't commit to a monthly amount on a date that suits the biller. You know, we see this every day with people on 0-hour contracts. People are still paid weekly, believe it or not, who manage their budgets weekly. We've got customers on ad hoc income, so you've got industries like acting. When I used to work in mortgages, that's very irregular income. So definitely, you know, with the cost of living crisis that's looming, there's going to be an increasing percentage of customers that can't commit to that monthly direct debit traditional payment method. I think I heard average energy bills are going to go up £700 per annum. Petrol prices are up, inflation pressures are up. Even in agriculture, farmers can't afford the fertilizers or to heat the greenhouses to grow the crops. So prices are on the up. So I think that the percentage of customers that commit to direct debit today will steadily reduce, and those that need a more agile way of managing their budgets and their finances is going to increase. And just touching on request to pay and 0-hour contract individuals, have you ever tried contacting your biller in your 15-minute break? I mean, the messaging of request to pay is key. One other thing which Simon touched on as well, what we've seen in the last couple of years since the pandemic, we have seen customers that would not normally have gone digital going digital, and with compliance-driven changes like 3DS2, some of you may have heard of, with two-tier authentication, biometrics required. I think consumers have adopted to that very effectively, and so they are up for new payment innovations. It just needs to meet their requirements and be trusted in regards to what we put in front of them. So I think that's pretty much where we are with that initial element.
Okay, great, David, thanks. And I think we've covered the benefit of request to pay for a company like yours and making sure your customers can have flexibility in paying their bills. It'd be good to understand your thoughts on, obviously, in the sector that Virgin Media plays in, there's lots of organisations like yours, and there is the capability for for Virgin Media and others to be able to set up in their own consumer apps request to pay without waiting for banks to do so. It'd be really good to understand what your thoughts are on appetite in the industry for that move.
Yeah, so I think just touching on where it would meet our consumer requirements first of all. So there's lots of people call them user stories, customer journeys. So where it would meet billers such as us requirements would be when we invoice the customer. We generally invoice them 14 days before a due date. So with a request to pay a link technology, customers can make payments as and when they can afford to. So what that means for us, we may get some funds in advance of the due date, or if they do fall into a collection scenario, overdue debt scenario, that value could be much smaller and have less impact to them. It can work in promise to pay scenarios, payment arrangements. So there's lots of areas where it can meet a consumer need, which reduces the cost of collections. I mean, anyone that deals with overdue debt will know the cost involved. So I think there are lots of customer scenarios where it's going to meet their requirement. Coming back to your other question about where a large biller would come into play, I think when I was part of the payment strategy forum, the assumption at that time was all the banks would align and deliver a solution. I think if that's not the case, then we would definitely be looking at where we could secure that technology. And I think the key thing here is whatever we do for a customer, it needs to be trusted, and they need to have faith in the product to use it. If you go back many years with contactless payments, it took a little while for people to adopt them. I think in London they call it the TfL moment, but outside of London they call it the latte moment, where you could actually just make a quick payment and it did become trusted. So I think for us it's looking at ensuring that what we present is adopted and adaptable for the consumer. With any large business, you'd look at impact assessment and cost and business benefit. But I think based on where the economy is going, it would be logical for large billers to adopt such technology and make it easier for our consumers to make payments as and when they can afford to.
Great, thanks, David. And the last question I've got for you is, what needs to happen to make request to pay really take off?
I think what we're doing today is a very good start. I think broadening the information around the business benefits for large billers and to consumers, I think that's one of the key ones. I think we need to understand clear alignment of banks on where they're stepping up to support this type of technology for their own customers, of course. And I think it's just more publicity around the benefits and where it can be used and the customer flows that can support this type of payment method. I think that's the key ones. And security and trust, again, is the key bit Simon touched on. It is more secure than those historical pay by links. We're always telling consumers never to click a link, whether it's SMS or email, and this overcomes that problem. So I think that's where we need to go.
Great, thank you, David. Okay, so that's the question and answer sessions with all of the panelists over, and I'm going to invite Anu from our request to pay team to come on and manage the questions that we've had through the Q&A function.
Thank you, Kate, and an excellent session. We've got lots of participants, and as expected, there's quite a lot of questions. I'm going to try to categorize them and cover as broadly as possible so we can answer the questions live. But if we can't, then the backup, of course, would be that we are going to publish them as part of our FAQ in our website. We'll capture those questions and bring it back to the wider audience. So without wasting too much time, the first one obviously is all the interest around, it's probably one of the topic that across the financial industry we're all seeing. So the question is around how can RTP prevent fraud or reduce fraud? So maybe from RTP side, Simon, if you want to start off, but then probably Tony, if you can give it from a payments wide view, and David and Tina. So focus on fraud. How does RTP prevent that?
Okay, thanks, Anu. The way that RTP is set up by the Pay.UK version is we're very conscious of keeping the ecosystem safe and secure. So the onboarding process is part of that, keeping it safe and secure. And any organisation that wants to join the service needs to be FCA authorised. So that's our first point in that journey. But from a wider perspective, in respect of users of the request to pay proposition, they will need to have a request to pay address, which is rather like an email address. So request to pay operates, as we've already said a number of times, it's a messaging service. So it operates as a messaging service, but it's the safe and secure version of email. So you have a request to pay address, which will be offered to you by the organisation that you utilise to enter the request to pay framework. One of the main things that features that we built in request to pay to keep it safe and secure is that when you get the initial request from anyone, so that's either from me to Kate or from David's company, from Virgin Media to me, you will get what we call a pre-authorization message, and that pre-authorization message basically prevents the first request being sent, and it basically just says Are you happy to receive a request from Virgin Media? And I have the right to then say yes or no, or can I have some more information? If I say no, I don't want to receive that, then all future requests from that individual or organisation will be blocked, so you'll never see one again. If you say yes, then all subsequent requests from that organisation will flow quite freely through the ecosystem. And if you say, can I have more information, then the biller needs to provide you with that more information, and you still have the capability to say yes or no. And if you do make a mistake and I say no, I don't want to receive my bill from Virgin Media, and then David phones me up and said, why have you blocked us? You know, you've received you know, your sport through the Virgin Media package. Why are you refusing? And I go, oh, really sorry, I didn't realize it was that particular Virgin Media. You can unblock yourself. So there are lots of elements that I can't, because I don't have the time, but those are the main ones that we have utilised and are quite unique to the UK proposition in keeping it safe and secure. And I think it was fundamental right at the day we started to build this, that one of the key principles was we had to make sure it was as safe and secure as it possibly could be. And one of the key things was to help prevent fraud, and that's why we moved away from receiving a link, because I've spent, you know, 30-40 odd years of my life in banking and payments telling people not to click on links. So it was one of the fundamental things that we wanted to incorporate into the request to pay proposition, that we kept it as safe and secure as we could, but also allowed individuals and organizations to confirm that if they wanted to receive this request, they knew who they were receiving it from and had the capability, if they weren't comfortable, to be able to block that. And one final thing is, if you still accept the request, you still have the capability to decline that if you're not sure. And then one of the other weapons that we've built in Pay.UK is COP. So RTP works with COP, so you can do a confirmation of payee as well when you come to pay the request. So I'll stop there and hand over to Tony and see if he's got, you know, from a payments association perspective, why RTP will help with fraud.
Well, thank you, Simon. You're the guy who knows this product. You've built it. So, but I'm really glad to see the underlying ethos around being safe and secure. To me, this is you know, we are in an era where there are even some countries now that are banning click-through links in any emails as a means of payment. I mean, Singapore or Australia, and this could well be the direction of travel. I'd like to quote Tim Piggott, whose question came up earlier. In fact, he's just lovely. He said, not a question, a comment, combining request to pay with payment security such as COP, enhanced data and digital ID of the payee could offer a leap in payment security to fight scams, especially in peer-to-business, but also P2P, and I believe business-to-business as well. And I agree with you, Tim. I think it has the potential to be a significant shift. You look at the UK finance figures of declared fraud. Now, authorized push payment fraud is now bigger than card-related fraud. You know, the scammers are getting better at it. Consumers are getting more desperate, and actually they're not learning. So we need to find a way of avoiding that sort of fraud levels. There's one of my friends around here. I live in Clapham. He's an interior designer, and of course, in Clapham, everyone has to have their own interior designer. And so, he invoiced for about £10,000 to his client. His client didn't pay for a month or so. A couple of weeks in, the client receives another email saying, awfully sorry, would you mind replacing the invoice you've just received with this one, because we got the VAT number wrong. What they'd actually changed is they changed the account receiving number. The money was then paid, £10,000 was paid to the scammer. And this sort of invoice related fraud, this is painful for small businesses, painful for consumers. And there was another question came up in the piece earlier about somebody it's cost them £10,000 because of APP fraud. It's not good news. It's not going away. The fraudsters are getting better at it. And I think request to pay can definitely help.
Thank you, Tony, for that, and Simon. I'm going to quickly move on to the other hot topic that's in everybody's mind, and that's how RTP can help financially vulnerable customer, or how can it help with the current increase to the cost of living. So I know, Tina, you mentioned this, but if I can get you back here to answer that one, would be great.
Yes, so I think it can help by giving a little bit more of control over to individuals who are often managing on perhaps tight budgets, or managing their cash flows that are coming in at irregular times. So when a direct debit, for example, doesn't work, if that is organized at a particular point in the month and that just rolls over from one month to the next month, if you're not on a regular income, then that makes it very hard to manage that type of payment. Return direct debits can then lead to individuals going into overdrafts, or incurring other charges or whatever, and for some individuals who are on very tight budgets, that can put them in an even greater vulnerable situation. So I think by giving consumers that greater element of control and empowering them to make a choice about, do they pay it on one day or do they pay it a couple of days later, can actually make a big difference for those individuals in terms of being able to make the payment and make the payment at a point when they do actually have money in the bank account to do so.
Thank you, Tina, for that.
Yeah, I'd like to reinforce that as well, certainly from a builder's perspective. I remember when I took out my first ever mortgage, I had a choice of paying it on the 5th or the 22nd. I think it was paid on the 23rd. So I think being able to manage when you make the payment, even if it's a quarter of it each, one payment a week, or as and when the funds are there, it just gives those people facing financial challenges more control of what they can afford and when they can afford it, especially when we hit in the winter period. And yes, sometimes it's a choice of energy or food. It's as basic as that. So it's very much aligned with what Tina said there.
Can I just add, I think it's also important to note that request to pay does not change any legal requirement. The request to pay comes with a due date. So, we all have to pay our bills by the due date unless we get into difficulty. And what request to pay does is allows that element of communication to actually allow the payer to say, look, I'm having difficulty paying, can you help me? And, with the 15 minutes that David and Tony talked about, you don't want to be spending 15 minutes listening to Vivaldi when you're in a difficult situation. You want to be able to get the answer. So I think we have to be really clear that request to pay does not change anything legally. You're still required to pay that bill. But it gives you that a bit more flexibility to be able to say, actually, I can pay a bit now and allow myself to buy this or that, and then pay the rest at another time. It doesn't change anything legally or contractually.
Okay, so I think we are out of time, unfortunately, and we have lots and lots of questions mounted up. So I think we'll respond to those questions, as you say, on our FAQs on the website. I wanted to say thank you so much to our panelists. That was really interesting to hear all of your different views. And thanks, Simon, for your SME expertise. If anybody has any questions or wants to get more involved in request to pay, please come to the Request to Pay team on info@requesttopay.co.uk. Lots of really good and interesting information to bring the proposition to life. So please do email the team if you want more information. And thank you very much for your time today. That's been great.